The Faroe Islands are the only place in the world that celebrate their Second World War occupation. It's a collection of beautiful, windswept islands in the North Sea that's a part of the Kingdom of Denmark. But while mainland Denmark commemorates Liberation Day, the anniversary of their occupation ending, the yearly celebration on the Faroe Islands is very different. It's called Flag Day, and it marks the anniversary of their occupation beginning. They print stamps celebrating those years and featuring the foreign soldiers, and have even invited veterans back for special anniversary events. And the reason why happens on the 9th of April 1940. Germany begins its invasion of Denmark at 4 a.m. and by 8 a.m. they've already won, as Denmark surrenders after just a few hours. But Denmark itself isn't the final goal. The Führer has been reading this strategy book written after the First World War by a German vice admiral, and the thesis in it is fairly simple. Great Britain are our natural enemies, the author says. Their command of the seas is all that stands in the way of German greatness in Europe. And he believes that another showdown is inevitable. But, he says, next time we really have to be smarter. Don't let Britain do World War I on us again. If we let them blockade us in the North Sea, then Canada and the USA will keep them alive while we starve all over again. And if we fall for that trick a second time, then really, that's on us. What we have to do instead next time is this. Act quickly and occupy both Norway and the Faroe Islands. Then we'll have all this lovely Atlantic coastline and a base in the North Sea that we can use to squash any blockades, launch our own U-boats to attack American ships, and maybe even invade Britain via the Shetlands one day. So already you can see just how high the stakes are in this story, because Britain would quite like to run it back and starve Germany out again. They would like American ships to make it over safely, and they would like Germany to not invade them via Scotland. These islands are tiny, with more sheep than people living on them, but suddenly the tension over who owns them could not be higher. And that's why Germany is acting so quickly. Taking Denmark is just a gateway to the two real prizes, because from there you can continue up to take Norway and all of its mines and huge coastline, which they quickly do despite Britain's best attempt to get in their way. But also, because the Faroe Islands belongs to Denmark, some are assuming that once you conquer Copenhagen, they too will automatically fall in line. So it's easy to imagine the terror on those isolated islands. All of Denmark's communication lines are actually cut during the mainland invasion, and so the islanders only learn that their parent country is under German occupation later via foreign radio broadcasts, and they are sure that they must be next. The definitive Faroese account of those days comes from local politician and broadcaster Niels Arge, who recalled the following scene taking place just 3 days later. Shortly after noon, two large grey ships appeared, going at a fairly high speed and headed toward the harbour. As they drew nearer, it was a great relief to many that it was not the Germans. It became clear that two British destroyers had arrived. As soon as they heard that Denmark had fallen so quickly, Chamberlain had met with the French and discussed this book of German strategies, knowing that they would next head for the Faroes. They instructed Churchill, who of course wasn't Prime Minister yet but was in charge of the Navy, that Britain had to act quickly to get there first. And Churchill's speech in the House of Commons, where he says, "We are also at this moment occupying the Faroe Islands, which belong to Denmark and which are a strategic point of high importance. We shall shield the Faroe Islanders from all the severities of war and establish ourselves there until the moment comes when they will be handed back to a Denmark liberated from the foul thraldom into which they have been plunged by the German aggressors." That speech is also broadcast on BBC Radio, so some in the Faroe Islands are looking forward to a British presence arriving. But when they pull up into the harbour, the Brits do still kind of have a job on their hands to sell this to the Faroese people, because the Faroe Islands had always had their own language and culture, and an independence movement had been on the rise lately, so some are seeing this chaotic 48 hours as their ultimate opportunity. They're saying, look, Denmark's finally been taken out of action, let's go it alone. Let's declare independence as the Faroe Islands, this is our moment. But then suddenly they're faced with these two British destroyers who are going, look guys, you're about to be invaded by a powerful foreign army and you really don't want that, it's going to be awful, trust me. And as for what I'm going to do about it, well, I thought maybe I might invade you instead, no worries if not. To go back to that Faroese account, Around noon, the ships appeared, and by 5 p.m, the British had occupied the Faroe Islands without a drama of any kind. They've successfully agreed a deal without a single shot being fired, but the darkest part of this story is yet to come. So Britain gets to occupy the Faroe Islands and use their ports for the duration of the war, thereby saving them from a much worse German invasion, and in exchange they agree to stay out of all local civilian affairs on the island. And that itself is already huge. It's the first time that the Faroe Islands have had local self-government. And to separate the Faroese economy from the Danish kroner, Britain also minted the first ever Faroese currency for them. But by far the most significant part that is still celebrated to this day hasn't happened yet. For his part, the Führer has found out that Britain got there first and is apparently furious. He tries to plan a new operation to take Iceland instead, but has to be told that no, without the Faroes it's completely unrealistic. The Faroese are a hospitable and kindly people. Very soon after the occupation, they opened their houses to our British soldiers, who now have all a modest circle of acquaintances. The Lovat scouts must serve days-long patrols along mountainsides and inaccessible fjords, but whenever there's a village, someone is sure to ask them in for cakes and coffee. That glowing praise is from a report on the occupation by British officer Eric Linklater, and the two cultures only get further and further intertwined from that point, with local diaries even noting that some Faroese women considered the British soldiers as their own sons. The Navy builds new bridges, roads and airfields in the Faroe Islands. Troops get the locals drinking tea and eating British sweets and singing British songs in their dance halls. There are up to 8,000 British personnel stationed there, so 1 on 4 people on the islands is British during this time, and it comes as no surprise that around 200 new marriages come out of it, in a fitting manifestation of Operation Valentine. Even the British consul to the islands, Sir Frederick Mason, married a local woman during this time. Westminster, though, feels that it needs a link not just to the local villagers, but the politicians to whom they've just given this unprecedented power, and so the Foreign Office finds people who speak Faroese and sends them out there, and they report that relations on the island are actually too good, if anything, and that mainland Denmark is apparently annoyed, and planning ways to make the Brits less popular. Unsurprisingly, these British Faroese speakers are all nerdy Oxford types who've studied Norse mythology under J.R.R. Tolkien, and who probably never imagined that this would come in useful in a life or death world war. But also, to the delight of some of the Highlanders who have been sent there, some words in Faroese are of course the same in Scottish Gaelic, and so they feel right at home in these dark, wind-battered places. But some of the troops who grew up in Britain's cities, they're getting what's been called Faroitis. They can't hack the isolation and the long winters, sat manning remote gun emplacements waiting for an enemy that never arrives, and some even request transfers to a more exciting theatre. It's often joked that Faroitis comes in 3 stages. First, a man begins to talk more to himself, then he begins to talk to the sheep, and then the sheep begin to talk back to him. But the suffering on the islands during the war doesn't stop at loneliness. Germany is still bitter that they didn't get the Faroe Islands, and since they do have Norway, they're very well placed to do air raids, trying to bomb these new airfields and bridges that Britain are building there. The waters are so rough that in a storm, sea mines laid by both Britain and Germany are washing up and occasionally killing Faroese civilians. German U-boats also torpedo and sink Faroese ships, particularly those that are trying to get in on the new gold rush. During this time, fish is of course scarce in mainland Britain, and prices for any kind of protein are at a premium, so Faroese fishermen realise that there's a fortune to be made. They either go fishing themselves, or they do the even more profitable but even more dangerous run to buy Icelandic fish and sell it into Scotland. Apparently 1/5 of the fish that Brits ate during the war came from these Faroese trade runs, which itself is another remarkable thing, that they're doing all this to keep their occupier alive and well fed. But the fact is that over 200 Faroese sailors died at the hands of the Germans in this way, which in such a small population is a huge chunk, and the wives back on land lived in constant anxiety. These losses, though, just hardened the reserve of the Faroese people and deepened their connection to the Brits, who had of course saved them from living properly under the thumb of those Germans. By this point, people from both sides are dying to help the other on the rough Atlantic seas of shared sacrifice. But undoubtedly the biggest thing that cemented this Blood Brothers pact was the flag. Remember that mainland Denmark was under German occupation, so when Faroese ships went out flying as they had always had to, the Danish flag, since they were a part of Denmark, Britain was liable to mistake them as enemies, and so the legend goes that when one proud Faroese captain, Hans Mikkelsen, was asked by the Royal Navy, well, don't you have any other flags on board that you could fly? He didn't need asking twice. He reached down for the flag of the Faroe Islands itself and proudly flew it from his mast. After this, all the other Faroese ships followed suit, and Britain officially gives the Faroese flag its first ever legal international recognition. The anniversary of that day, the 25th of April 1940, is still celebrated every year in the Faroe Islands as Flag Day. If you go around the world looking at all of the celebrations celebrating 50 years since the Second World War, you'll find that they all take place in 1995, the anniversary of it ending. But the Faroe Islands, they had their big Jubilee bash in 1990, the 50th anniversary of their occupation beginning. Surviving British veterans, so the people who had occupied this country, were invited to the party. Statues and plaques and memorials have been put up on the Faroe Islands by both sides, each thanking the other for their wartime friendship. In 2022, Flag Day was celebrated in the Churchill War Rooms in London, with representatives from both sides telling stories about the occupation and how you can still buy British tea and biscuit brands in Faroese shops. Britain kept their word and left peacefully after the war, handing the islands back to Denmark. But things would never be the same again. They had not just left behind the roads and airports that they had built, but also a vision of self-governance. Within 3 years, the Faroese negotiated a home rule status within the Kingdom of Denmark, and their independence movement has only grown stronger since then.